moderator for today's session is Shalani Rubisingha. Shalani is the Project Planning and Management Officer of the Center for Environmental Justice.
The global break free from plastic movement in Asia Pacific is ramping up its campaign against false solutions to plastic pollution. So titled False Solutions Exposed, the campaign closely comes after INC 2 for the Plastics Treaty, where several countries have yet to support high ambitions. And so it is important to convince governments, both local and national, to reject false solutions, not only in the treaty negotiations, but also in local policies. The campaign also follows the World Environment Day we just passed, led by the UN Environmental Program, the theme of which is Beat Plastic Pollution, which focused on solutions to plastic pollution. With various kinds of solutions being peddled by corporations and supported by international finance institutions and governments across the region, BFFP members are coming together to hold a series of webinars that aim to debunk false solutions to plastic pollution that are proliferating across Asia Pacific, as well as promote effective and lasting solutions such as reduction in plastic production, zero waste, and reuse. The webinar series will be held every Wednesday from today onwards until 19th July. Today, our session will talk about greenwashing and solutions financing. We are pleased to have with us staunch advocates, field experts, and campaigners who are leading the fight for climate justice and against plastic pollution. We will talk about what are the considered false solutions, how harmful false solutions could be, and the need for capping plastic production, addressing pollution at source. So we will also talk about diversity from false solutions and the need for more investment on solutions. So during the session, we will also launch the guidelines for journalists on reporting greenwashing and false solutions. So stay tuned for that. Join us in the next hour to learn and discuss greenwashing and solutions financing as we tackle the plastic pollution crisis. So before we start in today's program, a few reminders to all of you. Please make sure that the full name displayed on your Zoom account during the forum is the same name you used in the registration form. The organizers will use this information to record your attendance, especially for those who will need a certificate of participation. The details will be shared soon. You may use the Q&A function on Zoom, commonly found at the bottom of the screen or where your Zoom controls are. These questions will be answered by the speakers during the allocated time for Q&A. We also invite you to use the chat box to introduce yourself and exchange contact or links with your fellow participants. After the forum, kindly complete the evaluation form we'll be posting on the chat box to help us improve our next session and be able to offer good learning opportunities to more people. Our program will be in English for today's session. We have available interpretation for Bahasa Indonesia, Vietnamese, and Thai language. For Thai, actually, please click on the option that says Filipino. Our Thai interpreter will be on the Filipino channel. So I hope you know where to find that. It's the globe-like icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen where the Zoom controls are. So up next, let us have an overview of the impact of plastic pollution and what can be done about it. Here is an animated short video produced by Story of Stuff titled The Story of Plastic. Let us watch it.
You've probably heard about a giant trash island in the ocean. Or that poor sea turtle and the straw. Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use plastic products around the world. These companies go to places like Indonesia, where I live, and push their products onto communities that just aren't prepared to deal with all that plastic. Maybe they're used to using natural packaging. Maybe they live on a tiny island without a system of waste collection. And on top of that, countries in the global north are shipping their own plastic waste into these countries too. When you add that all up, it's no wonder so much of this plastic ends up in the environment. And globally, that's where a whopping 32% of plastic packaging ends up. 40% goes to a landfill, where plastic just piles up for future generations to deal with. And 14% is incinerated. Incineration is a nasty business, producing toxic smoke and fly ash. These super expensive facilities depend on plastic to burn everything else. It is oil and gas after all. So they want to see more plastic, not less. Yahoo! Then there's recycling. Unfortunately, it's not the solution that many people think it is. Just 14% of plastic packaging gets recycled, and only 2% is effectively recycled, meaning it becomes something as useful as before. The rest is downcycled into something worse. And most recycled plastic is only recycled once, before ending up in landfills, incinerators, or the environment anyway. So it turns out that we can't burn, bury, or recycle our way out of this problem. And we can't just scoop all that plastic out of the environment either. That's like trying to bail out a bathtub with a teaspoon while the tap is on full blast. So how about we turn off the tap by shutting down the plastic machine? That means passing policies that create systemic change. Like phasing out the single-use plastics that pollute the most. Ending the fossil fuel subsidies that are fueling big plastic. And holding companies responsible for the plastic waste they create. That's how we can achieve our vision of a zero-waste future, where all of our products and packaging can be reused or repaired, effectively recycled, or composted, and ultimately how we create a sustainable, circular economy that works for both people and the planet. Visit storyofplastic.org to learn more and take action.
Okay, so hope you are convinced why we are discussing this topic today. So to help us understand better of what are the considered four solutions and plastic crisis, our first speaker would discuss the need to address plastic pollution at source and how harmful four solutions could be. We have with us today a young, experienced changemaker from EcoWaste Coalition. EcoWaste Coalition is a national network of more than 150 public interest groups in the Philippines. The network also works on collaborate with communities and to advance simple, local, and holistic approaches and solutions to address waste, chemical pollution, and climate change. So Colleen has been working on campaigning to combat plastic pollution since 2019. She was previously the plastic campaigner of Oceania, Philippines, and is currently the campaigner of eco-waste pollution. She is also the outreach manager of the Asian Research Institute for Environmental Law. So let us hear from Colleen Salam. Over to you, Colleen.
Hello everyone. But first I'll just share the screen. I think the PowerPoint that was you can see it now. So for Eco-Waste Coalition, part of our work really is on policies to promote, to protect the country rather from plastic pollution and prevent those policies that promote false solutions. And we're here today to discuss what those false solutions are. So false solutions really is to ask yourself, is it um false versus real solutions is really to ask yourself, um, is the solutions presented to us preventing the production of plastics, or is it really just a delay or quick fix to address this kinds of to address the plastic crisis? So when we say full solutions, they do not only prevent waste, but they offer a delay to alternative means. And when it comes to real solutions, it's really zero waste systems. And what are those zero waste systems? So we have this zero waste hierarchy that when it comes to plastics, what we should be really doing or thinking is we have to have alternative delivery system, because the problem of plastics is really a systematic problem. It's more than a waste management problem, but rather a design problem. So we have to rethink, redesign that these products and packaging should be able to reduce and reduce. And we have this, what we call that's why there's like a huge broken line and a red line here that says unacceptable, because these are the false solutions that do more harm than good to our environment. So what are those false solutions? I encourage you guys to click on plasticsolutionsreview.com. So later I'll just put it in the chat box on what are those considered as false solutions. So these are bio-based plastics, biodegradable and compostable plastics, chemical recycling, incineration, oxidable plastics, plastic credits, plastic to fuel, and there's also a specific page for bioplastic clarification. So why are we targeting on bioplastics? Because technically they are still plastics. So don't be another victim of saying when they say like it's 100% compostable or 100% biodegradable, because technically they still have the same components, or like I said in the video earlier, plastics is like 99% fossil fuels plus other chemical additives. Bioplastics still have the same components of single-use plastic. And of course, they some of it is, have to have like industrial composting facilities to be actually effectively composted. So it's really still that. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also concept of plastic neutrality, but don't be confused with it with the concept of carbon neutrality. So what's the idea of plastic neutrality? Um, so it's like a plastic credit saying that there's a tradable certificate that represents a certain amount of plastic waste that has been recycled. But we know that of all plastic generated, only 9% has been recycled. And this recycling system is, of course, not proof that it's not enough to address the plastic crisis. So when you see a Coca-Cola advertisement that says that their plastic bottle is technically made of 25% marine plastic and it's 100% recyclable. So technically, they're just recycling. They're just putting it into those plastic bottles. They're just putting it into another plastic bottle. So this is also kind of like a part of downcycling. Another one is also on cement kilns. This is very prominent in countries like the Philippines. And according to our very own Department of Science and Technology, cement kilns is actually a major source of dioxin and furans. And we know that these chemicals are very, very harmful to our health. And not just in the Philippines, but countries like Spain has recorded high cancer mortality in facilities with cement kilns. So this is very prominent. Like the big corporations in our country are partnering with cement with cement factories or cement industries, and they're turning plastics into chairs, they're turning plastics to roads, to hollow blocks and stuff. But those actually still releases micro and nanoplastics. And again, of course, plastic is 99% fossil fuel. So this they also have like they have high chances of having heavy metals. So we've also recorded that. And next is on the waste to energy is actually a waste of energy and waste of people's money. So for example, in countries like Dubai and Singapore, it only met like less than 5% of the country's total energy demand. And even if they're saying that, you know, the waste to energy facilities that we're gonna put up will be the state of the art or will be the highest technology. But technically, even if those waste incineration facilities put in place, it has actually higher greenhouse gas emissions compared to the normal ones. So, and not just that, of course, this waste to energy facilities again release dioxins, and this is just like this is 6 of the 50, if I'm not mistaken, like 50 studies that prove that this waste to energy is actually very harmful to our health. Like in a span of a 5-kilometer incinerators in Spain, there's evidences of cancer, that it's really carcinogenic, and not just that, but also leukemia. Also, it's attributed to 42% of deaths due to cancer in Japan, which is like within the 1.2 kilometers radius of the incinerator. Next is on pregnant women in Mexico with significant association between parents exposure and the infants born in Taiwan with dioxins exposure as well. And in 7 kilometers with increase of incinerator particulates associated with increased morbidity from respiratory disorders among men. So this is just like the sample of the many studies on the attribution of waste to energy incinerator facilities in all over the world that we've recorded. Okay, so this is from Dr. Jorge. And communities are pushing back because we cannot these false solutions are technically misinformation, and this information that deceives the public. Like for example, as for sachets, sachets are multi-layered packaging, and in Philippines we do not have the capacity to recycle these kinds of sachets. That is why the consumers filed a complaint at the Department of Trade and Industry against Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Colgate-Palmolive, and Universal Redeemed because they put a recycle label in their packaging, but these products and packaging technically cannot be recycled and are impossible to recycle. So this is why we filed a case against these big polluters. And I know your guys are very familiar with these names because these are the usual suspects during our brand audits. It's the same name it's the same name for 5 years. It's the same brand for 5 years. So that is why we filed a case against this corporation. And we have it before. Like they're saying that, you know, this kinds of sachet, the sachet economy is the fault of the consumers. But really, way back in the 1950s, when I wasn't born yet, but you can search like what sari-sari stores or small local convenience stores in the Philippines look like. It looks like this. It's all refill and reuse. And we've had systems like this before. It's just really we have to go back to basics and go back to how it was before the plastic crisis. So to end my presentation, finally concluded, full solutions perpetuate the throwaway economy and minimize and do not minimize plastic production and plastic waste generation at source. Genuine solutions shall focus on zero waste approaches that promote reduction, reuse, refill, and redesign of products and delivery systems to refrain from generating more waste. And while solutions should be based on environmental justice, of course, you have to ensure that the solutions that we're doing are based on just transition. You should equally promote the welfare of the people, minimizing harm and ensuring justice, equity, and wealth. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Colleen. I'm sure most of us here observe practices around us that are false solutions. And thank you also for shedding lights on what are the real solutions, what we really need to do. So thank you for that clarification, Colleen. For our participants here on Zoom, if you have any questions so far, drop them on the Q&A box and we will accommodate that what we can later in this program. And now let us have a deeper understanding of international financing for solutions to plastic pollution. We have with us today the Deputy Director for Programs of the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or Gaia Asia Pacific, Maya Mazuri. Gaia is a global network that aims to catalyze a global shift towards environmental justice by strengthening grassroots social movements that advance solutions to waste and pollution. The network envisions a just, zero waste world built on respect for ecological limits and community rights, where people are free from burden of toxic pollution and resources are sustainably conserved, not burnt or dumped. Our second speaker has more than 15 years of combined work on policy advocacy and coalition building, on holding international finance institutions accountable, and on growing community solutions. She coordinates the program team of campaigners and leads the divestment campaign in Gaia Asia Pacific. Let us welcome Gaia Asia Pacific Deputy Director, Maya Mazuri. Maya, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting Gaia here. And thank you, Colleen, for that context on false solutions. I will leave some presentations and skip some slides, which I think would be repetitive. Today, I'm going to share what we are looking, the trends inside international financial institutions. We are coming fresh from the Asia Clean Energy Forum, where discussions on clean energy and other problems have been discussed. And so let me start our presentation. In last year, June 2022, the UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez was very upfront that new funding from governments for fossil fuel exploration or production is simply delusional. It would only further feed the scourge on war, pollution, and climate catastrophe. And a year earlier, the International Energy Agency also said that no new oil, gas, or coal development if we want to reach net zero by 2050. So these are two studies and policy statements that say public finance should never go to fossil fuels. So what we're seeing now is that petrochemical industry is frantic for Plan B. What are we going to do when public money is not available for us anymore? So we are looking at increased production of plastics. That's what oil and gas companies are saying, and more and more market outlook reports are looking at plastic production, and some companies are also looking at false solutions to address the byproducts. And this is happening at the climate space. We're also engaged. Our movement is also engaged, and we're looking at policies that restrict plastic production and to regulate the waste coming from plastic production. So we have the Global Plastics Treaty, and before that, there is already the EU Directive on Single-Use Plastics, and we are also looking at different countries where pockets of EPR and SUP regulations are already in place. So the fossil fuel and petrochemical companies need a plan B, as I've mentioned, and Asia and Africa, both emerging regions, are seen to drive growth to plastic production. This is going to be a problem for our region, especially that we are facing not only pollution, but as mentioned, climate change, a crisis, no? And everybody's talking about a poly crisis, an economic crisis. And do we need more debts around this in this context? So in addition to what Colleen said, what are false solutions? I think that was a very succinct description. But in terms of financing, we see false solutions that it do not result in actual cuts of greenhouse gas emissions, even when they promise to do so, and they do deny long-term solutions to plastic waste. So they're looking into projects like PET plastic recycling, but do not have long-term plans, or they lay down plans that with false solutions like circular economy with waste to energy incineration, etc., or projects that focus on PET recycling but never talk about plastic reduction. And then second, allow countries, corporations, and wealthy people most responsible for these emissions to avoid their obligations and responsibilities to cut GHG emissions and plastic pollution, generate environmental, social, and economic political problems and consequences, promote privatization of an essential service like waste, and marginalize existing solutions communities have built, and distract people of the real solutions. So it can come in many forms, technologies, like waste to energy incinerators, pyrolysis, plastic to hydrogen, bioplastics, which are not cheap. They come in billions of US dollars. Do we really need this? And then the second form is mechanisms. Could be plastic credit, which Colleen already mentioned a while ago, and then knowledge. They provide or perpetuate narratives that say this global south is problematic, deeply problematic, and is the source of solution without the source of pollution, without looking at the source of the pollution itself. No, the who produces this waste, and then create the narrative that false solutions, the techno fixes, the expensive ones, are what where investments should go into. So despite that we have a crisis, despite all the studies, all the pronouncement that public money should never go there, what we're seeing is that public money is being spent on creating demand for false solutions and extending the life of petrochemical industries. Why do we say this? In the banks, what we see is that the mechanisms are already in place, but poor countries are saying, we don't need these loans, we don't need this, we need grants. And then they create programs that put waste to energy incinerations and pockets of solutions that are not holistic. For example, and let me show you, there's in 2 years' time, there's plastic recycling with biggest producers of plastic without recycling standards in the country. So they're talking about $300 million US loan for Indorama ventures in 4 countries: India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. And you can see 300 million loan for the biggest polluter, the biggest producer of PET bottles in Asia. Do we really need to support and extend the life of the same polluters? If you see the initial environmental examination papers of these loan projects, there is nothing on dioxin and furans that Colleen earlier mentioned. There is nothing to monitor around mercury, or neither did they include baseline assessments of the communities. And they also only include 1 country, Thailand, even though the project is for 4 countries. So you see a lot of discrepancies, lack of due diligence in these kinds of projects, and the lack of a holistic approach on the plastic waste problem. And then second, let us say that these hundreds of dollars are being spent on countries with poor democracies. Communities are never consulted. They're never part of the project scoping. So that says a lack of disregard of human rights and health impacts of communities in the future. Second, the investments are also going to waste to energy as clean energy, as marine pollution intervention, as a COVID-19 recovery, because they say there's plastic waste, and also as part of a just transition portfolio. So even when we say or even when the EU, for example, is closing down their doors for waste to energy, we have banks in the region promoting waste to energy as part of the just transition, as part of our economic recovery, which we say these are dirty, these are expensive, and communities do not demand. What the communities demand is to exit from coal, to exit from oil and gas. But yet, here they are prolonging the communities by putting waste, transforming those old coal plants, for example, in the just transition portfolio, transforming them as a waste to energy plant. So continued struggle and pain for communities that have already been affected by coal plants. And then third, we hear the bank saying that this time they want protection for private sector because these technologies, these new technologies are new in Asia and the market is new. So they want upstream interventions. They will invest in policy interventions, incapacitating how to integrate this into budget programs. So we're not looking only to specific projects, investing in projects. We're looking into permanent institutionalization of false solutions in our policies, and that's more dangerous. Where do we see this? At the national level, we can see this at the climate change action plans, the plastic reduction roadmaps, and perhaps we can also see this through technical assistance projects transforming the waste guidelines of different countries. And then, of course, they have also interventions on shaping global development knowledge, like the Asia Clean Energy Forum, which they shape the narrative that these solutions are affordable, are environmentally friendly, among others. So what is and why call for this divestments?
Excuse me, Maya.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we have almost come to the end of the 10 minutes, so I can give you 1 minute to wrap up.
Yes, this is the last slide. Thank you. And then it's basically a political strategy aimed at public institutions who have to formulate a policy to remove public money from the fossil fuel industry, including petrochemical industries, into positive and just solutions to climate change and pollution. So why do we need to target public money? When we call for divestment, it's very important to be strategic. Public money is owned by citizens, and only through these institutions like banks, international financial institutions, public development banks, can we hold them accountable. Through these institutions aims at protecting the private sector to shield them from losses. Since these new solutions are very young and the market is still new until such time that it is already commercial. They have already a commercially viable states. So stopping public money from putting it into false solutions now and not in 10 years time, stopping it now will be very strategic for us, because all the policy drives, all the policy trends, infrastructure are happening at the global level, and we have to leverage those things to push governments and investors to stop putting money. Unfortunately, now the private sector is being seen as a player, and so the aim of this campaign is to starve big polluter industries of capital for expansion and preventing them from creating further harm in a region with deep polycrisis as a result of a continuing COVID-19 recovery, war, pollution, and climate change. And that is where I end my presentation.
So, Maya, I think the demand results in promoting for solutions, and I think that's why this kind of discussions we're having today are needed to reduce that demand. So thank you very much, Maya Azurin, again, the Gaia Asia Pacific Deputy Director. Up next, I think it's better that we talk about the harms of greenwashing and crucial role of the media in verifying or investigating false claims, and the effectiveness of proposed solutions to plastic pollution and the climate crisis. Today, we are also launching a new resource for journalists, media practitioners, advocates, and anyone communicating about greenwashing and climate solutions. This web page. To discuss this and introduce this new resource, we have our next speakers from Solid Waste Management Roundtable, or SWMRT, and Hazirudala. SWMRT is a collective of solid waste management practitioners working for the adoption of sustainable waste management practice by citizens and municipalities for improving public health, clean air and water, safe food, healthy soil, and inclusive livelihoods in India. Hazirudala, which means Green Force, is a social impact organization that works with waste pickers and other waste workers in India to ensure a life with dignity. Our next speaker, Pinky Chandran, is an independent researcher, author, and a journalist. She tracks policy and legal developments on issues related to waste management and its intersections. So let us welcome Pinky Chandran. Pinky, over to you.
Thank you, Chelani. So the question before us is, what is the reality of a brand's sustainability efforts concerning their products, services, campaigns, policies, certifications, partnerships, collaborations, or even investments? How does one understand vague, fancy buzzwords, idealistic statements, lofty goals, non-existent or unrealistic timelines, claims supported by unverified data, starting with, like what Mayank said, what was the baseline to begin with across all the parameters? Exaggeration runs deep, and so do lies and half-truth. So how do we sift the grain from the chaff? How do we uncover greenwashing? But first, what is greenwashing? Simply put, greenwashing, according to me, is a dishonest and deceptive claim meant to dismiss, disturb, or divide, a deceitful and dubious solution, often prompted or promoted as a disruptive idea or technology that is often dangerous and damaging. Deliberate and delayed tactics born out of desperation, meant to derail and distract from the real problem. So, having said this, first let me take you back to the early period of plastics industry that was characterized by excitement as plastic made flashy debuts. Marvels of Tomorrow, unveiled at the fairground as A Forum Ends, saluted the headline in New York Herald Tribune in 1939, offering people an escape from the depression and a refreshing prediction for the world of tomorrow. Plastic was a poster child for hope, from tableware to toothbrush, from costume jewelry to buttons and buckles, heels and stockings. There was a world of opportunity waiting to be made from plastics. And from 1950s, plastics found a new market or a new home, which is in the form of packaging. And so throwaway culture was embraced, disposability ruled as it was convenient, clever, and comfortable. And then, as the litter started attracting attention way back in the 1950s, companies like Coca-Cola and other industries, including the National Association of Manufacturers, had launched an informational campaign titled "Packages Don't Litter, People Do," through a non-profit organization called Keep America Beautiful. And there's a link to the much talked about commercial on People Start Pollution, People Can Stop Pollution. We'll share it in the chat box so you can watch it when free. But this particular campaign was cleverly designed to do away with the threat of a throwaway bottle ban in the US state of Vermont. So that's how you can see the traces of how greenwashing has permeated into the very being of what we are looking at when you're looking at real solutions. From then on, the narrative definitely shifted to individuals who are not doing their bit in addressing the problems of piling plastics. And so enough funds were poured into anti-litter campaigns, tugging in on the moral compass of people who are alarmed by the garbage. Many governments and organizations jumped the bandwagon. Some examples include like the Great Plastic Pickup in the UK. Then in India, we also have our own Swachh Surakshit Sagar campaign, one of its kind, longest running coastal cleanup campaign. In countries like Australia, McDonald is a founding partner of Clean Up Australia Day and has been on a journey to clean up local communities for over 30 years. Because, and their website says, they're conscious of the rubbish generated from the fast food and takeaway. But the more we clean, the more trash getting generated. But mind you, if you look at the picture on the slide, you will find that the McDonald cleanup also uses a plastic bag to collect all the plastic, and it's a branded plastic. So is that a real question? Is a question. So again, from there, if you look at it, the attention shifts back to recycling campaign. Now, with more focus on individual actions, with simple things like practicing the act of putting things in the right bins. But is that all? No. First, let's look at the language. And why does language matter? What do we truly mean when we use the terms sustainable or circular? Are these terms aspirational and ambitious? Yes, it is. But then, do we suffer from an ignorance bias or an altered reality? Is the term circular economy then an oxymoron? What do we really mean when we talk about circular economy of plastics? Coming to sustainability, it's worthwhile recalling that a US-based NGO, Earth Island Institute, filed 2 claims in 2021 against some of the companies. The first one was on Coca-Cola, because it had engaged in false and deceptive advertising by claiming on its website and other marketing materials that it is a sustainable company that takes responsibility for its plastic. But here, if you go on to read Break Free from Plastics report from the brand audits, you can really decode what that statement means. The NGO had asked the court for an order prohibiting Coca-Cola's greenwashing marketing campaign in the District of Columbia. And the second lawsuit was against Blue Triton's brand's advertising campaign, in which it claimed to be a sustainable company working for a waste-free future, despite its ongoing and increasing contribution to plastic pollution. Both the cases are ongoing. So it's important for us to read between the lines, to read between what is being projected, marketed, to what is being actioned and how it's being demonstrated. Because what do we really mean by taking responsibility for its plastic, and how many years of Break Free from Plastics brand audit continuously names Coca-Cola as the polluter number 1. And the term sustainability or sustainable is also so loaded, because right now, I mean, forget the 1972 definition of what we were looking at, what do we mean by sustainable development and things like that. Just the term sustainable right now has many, many angles to it. Because it's not just climate change, but it also has poverty angle, gender equality angle, issues of equity. Are you treating your workers fair? So how can you just do 2 things and call yourself sustainable, or do you need to do all and then call yourself sustainable? Then I know Colleen already mentioned everybody's favorite term, biodegradable, because in simple terms, it means breakdown. And normally when you prefix any word with bio, that means we automatically imagine the product is greener. Like just today in my WhatsApp chat, where we have a group of solid waste management activists, or you can say citizens who are part of this group, somebody mentioned saying, can you please help us with some sustainable alternatives? Example, bio bags. And we all know that many studies show that biodegradable plastic fails to fully biodegrade in the real environment and can remain in the environment for years. So the question is, how long will it take to break down, and at what cost? Can we account for the social and environment cost? And why is that information not being shared upfront? Again, nobody talks about the toxic additives and contaminants, and we all know that there is also this whole risk of diverting land from food production to look at investing in these kind of solutions. So the trade-offs are not made apparent. And then the compostable plastic. Does it mean, but nobody ever mentions that we need a separate stream of collection and an industrial facility for composting? Does anyone ask these companies the modus operandi to collect them back? Because it's just free for all. It can go into your regular recycling collection, but then it would hamper and contaminate the existing collection. Then you have this another buzzword in terms of term, which is ocean plastics and ocean bound plastic. Now, with ocean plastic, dare I say, it is a fantasy or an illusion that we create to clean up our oceans. Here, I'm not disputing the fact that cleanups are important, but we might be able to pick up all the voluminous material. But in reality, less than 1% of ocean plastic floats on the surface. Most of the plastic is actually a soup of plastic microparticles. Many of them are invisible to human eye. So, what are we meaning when we're talking about it? We don't really have a realistic, efficient way to remove this from our system yet. And then nobody talks about microfibers from washing machines that leach into our water bodies from washing and wearing synthetic clothes. Why do these labels, what do these labels say there? So, is a conscious collection sustainable, or is a conscious collection a way to soothe a balm over our guilt? Is
Excuse me,
another thing.
Pinky.
Yes, I'm finished.
Just remind me. Yeah, oh, sure. Thank you.
I need 2 more minutes, please. With ocean-bound plastic, again, there is a lot of claims. The questions to ask is, where is the money going? What are the investments made? And who are the collaborators, local partners? Has it resulted in wiping out an informal player? Are they being paid regular market rates? But the same is also true for regular collection. In fact, for example, Diago, on their website, it says that we have set up 10 plastic buyback centers across Agra and Kumsi to collect plastic bottles after consumer use. Now, the questions to ask, was there an infrastructure in first place? Who's been appointed to run these centers? Are the workers employed? What are the responsible sourcing guidelines in place? How long will these center runs? What are the next steps for the waste workers moving up the ladder? The question here is also for how long will they continue to sell in the same route? You have to watch out for certain terms such as recycled and ethical sourced and fair trade. Again, if I look at the British American Tobacco website, it says, as for cigarettes, 93% of our plastic packaging can be recycled, and all polyfilm as well as tear-off strips used on packs can be recycled, subject to local recycling infrastructure. So where is the question of you taking responsibility of your own way? Then you have the likes of Colgate, who has in Philippines launched plastic waste collection program, which includes using recovered plastic for making eco bricks. And Colleen has shared things about it. The last one that I want to talk about is decoding a press release. So when you get a press release which says Dabur becomes the first Indian plastic waste neutral company, it just reads like India's largest science-based Ayurveda major, Dabur Limited, has now become 100% plastic waste neutral company in India, having collected, processed, recycled about 27,000 metric tons of post-consumer plastic waste from all over India in 21-22 financial year. Nowhere in the press note, if you just Google it, you'll find the link. I'm happy to share the link. It does not talk about how much has been put, by the type of materials. They have said we work with government registered recycling partners across the country, but there is no numbers. Where are the numbers? And then how have they looked at it? What is the payment methodology? Is working with school children enough? So I think at every step, when you're talking about greenwashing, even as reporters or journalists, or even as citizens, as conscious citizens, we need to be questioning things about it. And what happens when projects are launched with massive outreach programs, and then it is stopped, like the Unilever sachet recycling program? Why has there been no follow-up statements? Why has there been no apology from the company to talk about what happened or acknowledge their failures? And I'm not talking about plastic credits, because we've already talked about it. But lastly, certifications. Are the certifications also without controversies is the question. And in conclusion, I just want to say, we don't want selective, as consumers also, we don't want selective disclosures, either at the firm or the product level. We want to be aware of the hidden trade-offs. We want proof backed by data traceability. We don't want vague claims and irrelevant ideas. We want you to take responsibility, owning up and demonstrated action. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm just going to, very quickly run you through it's a proud moment for all of us that we're actually going to be launching a greenwashing guide. And this is created by members from BFFP and Plastic Pollution Coalition. And the guide basically talks about a few of the key elements, which is what is greenwashing, how to tell if it is greenwashing or not, some of the case studies, just the previous slide, what to, no, previous slide, what to do when you're working on story, who are the stakeholders, what are the examples, how do you look for solution-based, stories, and how do you write any particular story when covering false solution and greenwashing, to look at it from a solution lens and to really look at the different kinds of questions. But representation is so important, because it cannot be like what I gave you an example of a press note. How do you decode all of that? So that's the thing. Next slide will show you how you can download the guide. So if you go into the Break Free from Plastic website, you can fill up this particular form, which is on the right side, and then the document will be delivered to you on your inbox. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pinky. I think you shed light on how companies mislead us to believe that they are sustainable while they're actually not. So now we will open the floor for questions from our participants. I invite our speakers to join us again on screen. Colleen Salamat of EcoWaste Coalition, Miriam Maya Mazuin of the Asia Pacific, and just now Pinky Chandran of this WMRT, and Hazirudala. Okay, we have some questions in our Q&A. I think some of the questions were answered by our panelists already. So I selected this one. Luz Wagner, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. He's asking, would you know how much energy is produced by incineration? Something like kilowatt hours or tons of plastics incinerated. Can our panelists answer that?
It really depends on the size of the plant and the kind of feedstock that's putting in there.
Okay. Actually, next question was for Maya. I think you already answered that. Yeah. So there's one question asking, can we agree that the concept of recycling is a diversion because it's primarily downcycling ending as microplastic, which is not recoverable or removable? Colleen or Pinky, I would like you to answer that. Colleen, you're on mute, and also Pinky. Okay, the question is, can we agree that the concept of recycling is a diversion because it's primarily downcycling ending as microplastic, which is not recoverable or removable?
Yes. For the previous question, Miko has already replied on chat, along with the link.
Right. Sorry, I was not on that. And then we have Welcome Walter asking, what about the use of single-use plastics in hospitals? Is there any way that can be used?
I think for single-use plastic in hospitals, many countries have already framed rules of how they need to be managed. And I think we should look at what each country's rules are to be able to look at that in much more detail.
Colleen or Mayam, do you need to add anything to that?
Healthcare without harm is actually in this work, and if anyone in the group is here they're better. I think they're the better organization to
I-
respond to that.
I can respond to that. Hi,
Yeah.
this is Faye.
Yes, Faye, please go
Hi.
on.
Yes, for that question, it's a complex question, but in audits that were performed within the Asia Pacific region, it was also revealed that most of the plastics in hospitals, in any healthcare setting, are also single-use plastics. So if that first is addressed, that would lessen the problems of the healthcare sector as well. In terms of the plastics used for operation, for those kind of things, those are being handled already. But what is specifically important is lessening the packaging itself. Because all of us have been inside healthcare facilities. Packaging is the number one problem as well. When you go inside an operating room, everything that goes inside the operating room is considered hazardous. So lessening those that are coming inside those strictly hazardous areas should also be a solution to lessening plastics use in healthcare. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Faye. And I think that's all the time we have for our questions, I'm afraid. I think most of them were answered in the Q&A itself. So thank you very much to our speakers, Colleen Salamat, Ma'am Azureen, and Pinky Chandran. Thank you very much for your time and joining us today to share your insights around greenwashing and solutions financed. So thank you everyone for joining our discussion today, and we hope that the guide for journalists reporting on greenwashing and false solutions will be helpful to your work as well. Again, you may download the new resource at breakfreefromplastic.org. In a while, you'll see the link in the chat. You can see the web page and fill out the form and then submit. After submitting, and you can check your email to see the guide that will be sent to you. And we also request you to share your feedback through this link that is posted on the chat. Because that will help us improve our next sessions. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion and you learned a lot as well. Please join us in our next 4 sessions in this series for Solutions Exposed, Busting Myths and Unveiling Real Solutions to Plastic Pollution. Up next, we will be talking about waste burning, advanced recycling, and zero waste approaches. That is on 28th, next Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. Delhi, 4 p.m. Manila, and 8 p.m. Auckland. Our 5-part webinar series takes place every Wednesday, so follow up until July 19th, same time. Learn more about the campaign and resources and learning opportunities available to you at breakfreefromplastic.org, our website. To close today's session, we leave you with this video primer about the Global Plastic Treaty that governments are negotiating and developing until 2024, which could spark systematic change in addressing plastic pollution. The link is there for you to fill out your feedback. On behalf of the Global Break Free from Plastic movement, thank you for joining us here at False Solutions Exposed webinar series. Thank you.
What do Exxon, Greenpeace, and Rwanda have in common? The answer might surprise you. A lot of people don't know this, but right now, 175 countries are negotiating a treaty to solve plastic pollution. And there are a lot of players in the room. Let's break it down. We all know about the plastic problem at this point. It's a problem so big that no country alone can solve it. So last year, global talks began to forge an international plastics treaty. It's a big deal, but an even bigger deal is that countries agreed it'll be legally binding. That means if governments don't abide by it, there could be actual consequences. And now, world leaders are meeting periodically to negotiate the terms of the agreement. But the devil's in the details, and this is where you're gonna come in, so pay attention. We need a plastics treaty that, 1, has deadlines to slash plastic production. Ending the cycle of plastic pollution for good requires getting to the root of the problem by cutting plastic production. See, the plastics crisis is fundamentally a crisis of volume. There's so much plastic being created right now that it's just totally unmanageable. Basically, if you've got an overflowing bathtub, don't bail it out with a teaspoon, turn off the faucet. 2, we need a plastics treaty that advances environmental justice. We need this treaty to prioritize the health, livelihoods, and expertise of communities and workers all along the plastic supply chain. Look, we know plastic harms people. The fossil fuels and chemicals it's made of are toxic, and they pollute our air, our water, our food, and even our bodies. So those most impacted, whether they live next to an ethane cracker in Pennsylvania or work as a waste picker in the Philippines, need to be at the decision-making table. Number 3, we need a treaty that rejects false solutions. Major polluters like Exxon are lobbying for a weaker treaty. But why are the companies that created the problem even allowed in the room in the first place? And the things the industry is pushing, like what they call advanced recycling or plastic offsets or more beach cleanups, those are not real solutions. They're just greenwashing tactics that let industry keep making more plastic. With negotiations underway, we need to build enough public pressure around the world to make sure the treaty is strong enough to solve the problem. And we need to keep certain companies and countries from getting in the way. The good news is, many countries are advocating for strong terms. Let's call them the High Ambition Coalition. Nations like Rwanda and Ecuador and Norway and Peru, they're leading the way. Other countries, not so much. Some of the world's most powerful countries, like the US, where I live, and Saudi Arabia, they're resistant to passing a strong treaty because they're the major producers of either plastic or the fossil fuels that plastics are made of. So this is where you come in. If you've felt helpless, or like, my individual actions can only do so much, this is the opportunity for the major sweeping changes that we've been waiting for. But world leaders need to hear from us. We need participation from people like you and me to make sure we're drowning out corporate lobbying and getting the strongest possible plastics treaty we can. So what kind of treaty will the citizens of the Earth get? The one we fight for.